The audition hall of the reality show, the London Palette, was packed with contestants and cameras. Dozens of spotlights hung from the ceiling, shining down on each cooking station like stage lights, making even the smallest bead of sweat feel heavy. People struck poses, adjusted their hair, spoke their recipes loudly to catch the boom mics. Dishes were plated like museum exhibits, everything crafted to impress. Clara Bennett was a complete exception. She stood at the last station, like a forgotten piece of the backdrop. Her wrinkled burlap apron was loosely tied, her dark brown hair pulled back with a faded black elastic. No branded logo, no support team, no camera crew filming her. On her table, there were no French copper pans or fancy vacuum sealers, just a pot of water, a slice of toasted dark rye, a few evenly trimmed asparagus spears, and one egg slowly poaching. Clara worked as if she were at home, quiet, meticulous, and unconcerned with being seen. On the opposite side of the kitchen floor, someone entered and the room instantly dropped a few decibels. Gordon Vale, the most powerful man in British cuisine, 3 Michelin stars, the face of more than 8 luxury brands. This year's lead judge on the London Palette, he wore a charcoal gray suit, a silver silk tie, and a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, every movement followed by a camera. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his black leather shoes polished to a mirror finish. Gordon didn't walk. He advanced. Each step had its own rhythm, sharp and precise like a chef's knife. He paused at each contestant's station, delivering critiques that were both sharp and wounding. Some contestants teared up, others held their breath. When he reached Clara's station, he stopped. On the tray was a white porcelain plate. In the center, a crisp slice of dark rye toast, topped with 3 perfectly seared asparagus spears. Nestled in the middle, a poached egg with a glowing golden yolk. The whole thing drizzled with rich brown butter and a few threads of lemon zest. No meat, no mousse, no trace of Michelin ambition. Gordon slowly raised his gaze from the plate to the woman standing before him. "This is your entry?" he asked, voice as flat and cool as a steel counter. Clara nodded, her eyes unwavering. "Yes." Gordon smiled, not broadly, but the kind of smile from someone who's seen too many mediocre things dressed in grand names. "Poached egg and toast," he repeated as if trying out the punchline to a joke. "You sure you're in the right place? This is the London Palette, not a railway station canteen." Clara said nothing. She knew she'd be criticized, possibly cut in the first round, but she had chosen this dish anyway, the one her mother used to make every weekend with whatever they had. And when her mother passed, it was the first meal Clara cooked on her own, not to eat, but to remember. Gordon tilted his head and kept going. "Or maybe you're aiming to play the underdog among professionals, hoping the audience feels sorry for you?" A few chuckles echoed from backstage. One female judge frowned, but the cameras stayed trained on Clara, waiting for a reaction: anger, tears, panic. None came. Clara simply pushed the tray toward him. "Please, try it." Gordon picked up a spoon, sliced through the egg, its warm yolk spilled out. He scooped up a bit of egg, asparagus, and brown butter. No one expected anything but a sarcastic remark. He brought the spoon to his mouth. Silence. The moment stretched longer than usual. Gordon's eyes stopped moving. He didn't speak, didn't wince, didn't nod. He just stood there. Clara watched him, not anxious, just observant. Because she knew this dish didn't come from a recipe, it came from memory. And memory, when it's true, makes people pause. Gordon set the spoon down, his lips pressed together gently. His right hand touched the edge of the table, as if for unconscious balance. There was a flicker in his eyes, not because something was wrong with the food, but because it brought back something buried too deep. No one laughed anymore. No one spoke. A silence fell, as if something significant had just happened, though no one quite knew what it was. Gordon stepped back. No comment, no pat on the back, no nod. He turned and walked away, as if he'd just brushed against a memory he didn't want to relive. Clara bowed her head, quietly tidying up the bowl of leftover egg water. No interviews, no one asked for the recipe. But what needed to be said, she had already spoken through the dish. And Gordon, a man who never ran out of words on television, had nothing to say. You're watching soul stories where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2, A Girl Without a Backstory. 2 days after the preliminary round, the name Clara Bennett started appearing on food forums and television fan groups. Not because of her dish, not because of exceptional technique, but because of Gordon Vale's expression. He went silent. A post with that title went viral, accompanied by a close-up photo of Gordon's face as he tasted Clara's poached egg. In the image, his usually sharp, cold eyes had softened, touched by something that looked like pain. Clara became a hot topic, but when reporters began digging into her background, they discovered there was nothing to dig. No culinary school record, no professional social media, no cooking awards, no published cookbooks, no standout classes she'd attended. Just a few old articles about a roadside diner in Yorkshire, where a girl named Clara had once worked 3 years ago, then disappeared. The show's producers were confused. They were used to crafting stories around contestants with well-defined histories, easily molded into compelling personal arcs. But Clara was a blank space, and that blank space made people curious. Gordon, however, didn't hide his irritation. In a closed-door judges' meeting after the preliminary round, he slammed Clara's file down on the table. Who is she? Someone with no formal training, no verifiable skills, and she makes it through just because I didn't say anything? Another judge responded, "You don't think maybe it's because her food was actually good?" Gordon sneered. "A poached egg left me silent. Fine. But a national competition can't run on fleeting feelings." But the producers thought differently. The clip of Gordon tasting Clara's dish had reached over 5 million views in just 48 hours. Hashtags like "Sure Clara Bennett," "Egg that shut Gordon up," and "The Silent Breakfast" were trending on Twitter. The audience loved her. The way she stood still, never defending herself. The way she cooked like she was holding a memory. The way someone mocked with nothing to flaunt could still bring the most famous man in cuisine to absolute silence. And television, like any industry, follows the audience. Clara was officially confirmed as one of 10 contestants entering the main televised competition. The girl with no backstory, no support team, no media-ready look was now the accidental protagonist. Gordon was not pleased. During the first orientation session, he refused to look at Clara. When she was assigned a cooking station next to his, he switched positions. When the cameras weren't rolling, he told the director, "I don't do reality show stunts." But that only made the audience more intrigued. They pushed the narrative further. Will she silence Gordon again? Who is Clara, really? If she doesn't need a pass to prove herself, does talent alone suffice? Online, fans started digging through local articles. They found an old photo of Clara beside an elderly woman, confirmed to be her mother, Mrs. Helen Bennett, a retired elementary school teacher. Clara had once quit everything and returned home to care for her. They also uncovered a comment under a farewell post from the nursing home where Clara had once worked as a kitchen assistant. Clara didn't say much, but her winter grilled fish once made Miss Margaret finish her plate for the first time after 3 months of refusing food. A dish that can change someone's mood, that's enough for me. Still, Gordon maintained his cold stance. He didn't believe in vague emotions, didn't believe someone without formal training could go far, and more importantly, he didn't trust his own reaction that moment of silence Clara had drawn out of him. Clara knew, but she didn't respond. During the first taping session, when the director asked about her past, she only said, "I don't have a big story to tell. I just have a few dishes. I hope they'll tell a little about me." Gordon heard her, but made no comment. That girl irritated him, not because she did anything wrong, but because she didn't even try to stand out, and still, he couldn't stop noticing her. And he hated that feeling. This week's challenge on the London palette came with a strange theme, a dish from memory. It wouldn't be judged by technique or measured by protein content, but by something far more elusive, emotion. And that very thing made the contestants both thrilled and terrified, but not Clara Bennett. When the prompt was announced, she simply bowed her head, pressed her lips together, and quietly pulled a small notebook from the pocket of her apron. On the first page, written in faded handwriting and slanted purple ink, was a single line: "For those who used to eat in silence." She knew exactly what she would cook. Not the cookies her mother used to make on rainy days. Not the scrambled eggs they once shared when both were still healthy enough to eat together. But a simple vegetable soup, the one her mother used to make on the last Sunday of every month, then bring to the Briar Hill orphanage. Back then, Clara was just a little girl. She would sit in the car, waiting, peering through the foggy window as her mother, in a gray apron, stirred a large pot of soup. The aroma would drift all the way to the street. She would never forget the eyes of the children at the orphanage that day. Not the eyes of hunger, but the eyes of waiting. Clara began prepping the ingredients: onions, celery, carrots, squash, potatoes. She peeled each potato as if she were caressing a memory, sliced each carrot like she was cutting through the years. No one paid attention. Everyone else was busy recreating elegant childhood dishes: roast beef from a summer in Rome, the taste of scallops from a last dinner with a father, cream puffs rewarded after a graduation ceremony. All Clara had was vegetable soup. Gordon passed by her station. The producers had asked the judges to visit the kitchens for extra footage. He wasn't planning to stop until an unfamiliar scent caught his steps. Not unfamiliar in a strange way, but in the way an old melody suddenly rises in a crowd. The scent of celery softened to sweetness, onions lightly caramelized in olive oil, rich simmered vegetables, and something warm blanketing it all. He froze. "What are you making?" he asked. Clara didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the simmering broth. "Vegetable soup." "Vegetable soup?" Gordon raised an eyebrow. "Trying to win the audience with a get-well-soon meal?" Clara let out a soft laugh. I'm just cooking what I remember." Gordon squinted slightly. "And who cooked it first?" "My mother," Clara answered slowly. "She used to volunteer at Briar Hill." Gordon went still. That name Briar Hill struck his mind like an invisible bell. He knew that place. Knew it well. Briar Hill was the orphanage where he spent the first 4 years of his life. A place no one wanted to remember, but no one could forget. He looked at Clara, closely truly, for the first time, without the lens of sarcasm. "Did she work in the kitchen there?" he asked, his voice noticeably slower. Clara shook her head. "Not officially. She just came a few times a month. No name tags, no paperwork. She always said, as long as the food reaches those who need it, it doesn't matter who made it." Gordon swallowed hard. A memory surged up. A blurry image of a brown-haired woman wearing a scarf stirring a massive pot of soup in a cold kitchen. He had been 8. No one knew her name. No one asked. But whenever she came, the soup would be warm enough to eat without bread. And that night, the children always slept well. He never thought he'd encounter that soup again. And now, it was steaming right in front of him. The judging began. Clara stepped forward, carrying a silver tray with a plain white bowl. No garnish, no decoration. She stood beneath the stage lights, not trembling, not trying to explain herself. Just a steady voice. "This is the soup my mother used to make while volunteering at Briar Hill. Every time she cooked it, she'd say, 'A good dish doesn't surprise anyone. It silences them.' I'm not trying to surprise anyone. I just hope a few people fall silent." The audience let out a soft laugh, but not Gordon. He picked up his spoon, took a bite. That flavor, it wasn't similar. It was exact. Not because of the seasoning or proportions, but because of the feeling. That sensation of warmth rising from the throat, spreading in the chest, stinging the nose. Not from pepper, but from memory. He set the spoon down, said nothing, could say nothing. Gordon stood up and left the judges' table, to the stunned silence of the studio. Cameras swiveled to follow him. The host froze, ready with a joke, but the look in Gordon's eyes didn't allow interruption. Clara remained in place, not smiling, not nervous, just calm. One of the other judges leaned in and whispered, "Did you know Gordon used to live at Briar Hill?" Clara turned, startled. Number I didn't know. She truly didn't. But now she understood. The dish her mother once brought to nameless children had once saved one of them, and now a part of that meal had returned through Clara's own hands, to reach the heart of a man who thought he had nothing left to feel. When the episode aired, social media exploded. "She's the daughter of the woman who made soup for orphan kids." Gordon cried for the first time on television. Clara doesn't just cook food, she cooks memories. The press called it the soup of silence, but to Gordon, in his heart, it had another name: the soup of the nameless. Gordon Vail wasn't the kind of man who easily acknowledged his emotions, especially not in front of millions of viewers, and a camera always ready to catch the slightest frown. He maintained his cold exterior in the following episodes of The London Palette, still mocking contestants, still cutting off others mid-sentence like a clean knife to a chopping board. But with Clara Bennett, the girl who had left him speechless not once, but twice, Gordon couldn't keep his usual rhythm. One week after the Dish from Memory round, Gordon called Alina West, the show's producer, and asked bluntly, "That girl, has she accepted any job offers yet?" "She's turned them all down," Alina replied. "Doesn't want to open a restaurant, doesn't want to be a brand ambassador, refused cookbook deals." What does she want? A clean kitchen and silence. 3 days later, Gordon personally traveled to Windermere and knocked on the door of a small house on the edge of town, where Clara lived with her mother. The 3 Michelin star chef, the same man who once turned down a royal banquet for the Swedish crown, was now standing at a weathered wooden gate, beside a water jar filled with mint plants. Clara opened the door, still in her old button-up shirt and linen apron. No makeup, no surprise, no suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "To offer you a trial position as my kitchen assistant," he replied, as if proposing the most ordinary thing in the world. "You're joking?" Clara gave a soft laugh. "Dead serious. 1 month, no pay, just the kitchen, knives, and the truth." She paused for a few seconds, then nodded. Vale Gordon's namesake restaurant was tucked in central London, behind a gray steel gate with no sign. There were no online reservations. If you wanted to dine here, you had to call at least 3 months in advance or be on the list. Clara arrived on a Monday afternoon, the only time the kitchen wasn't in operation. Gordon led her through rows of stainless steel counters, walk-in freezers, and the tasting room. Everything here was obsessively clean, not a single spoon out of place. Spices were measured down to the milligram. The kitchen crew moved like a silent, synchronized army, precise and wordless. Clara felt like she had stepped into another world. "I'm the head chef here," Gordon said flatly. "You're not here to impress. You're here to learn and serve. And if I don't fit in, the exit's in the back. But don't worry, I won't be tasting your soup again." Clara chuckled. That last line, it wasn't mockery. It was half a joke. And for the first time, she saw Gordon without his armor. From the very first week, they clashed constantly. Clara didn't use Japanese knives, she preferred German ones. Gordon insisted on uniformly cut ingredients. Clara said, "A carrot should be cut the way it wants." He followed an exact ratio for hollandaise she adjusted by feel. Gordon called it reckless. Clara called it listening to the food. "So you go by instinct, and if it's wrong, you blame the soul of the dish?" Gordon snapped when Clara let the heat run a little high on the lemon-steamed cod. "Number I go by memory. My mother once told me if you don't taste every part, you're not cooking with your heart." Clara didn't back down. They were opposites. One believed in absolute precision, the other in emotion and intuition. But in the midst of their heated arguments, there were moments, small, surprising ones, when they began to see each other differently. One time, the night chef accidentally mixed salt for sugar in the main sauce. Gordon was about to explode when Clara stepped in silently, tasted it, then calmly mixed a blend of fresh ginger, lemon juice, rice wine, and soy sauce, adjusting it with a pinch of dill seeds. The dish was saved. "You didn't blame him?" Gordon asked quietly. "I've made worse mistakes. Once my mom just told me, mistakes don't define you. How you fix them does." Gordon didn't reply, but his eyes softened unmistakably. One night, the kitchen was closed. Clara stayed late to mop the floors and clean a set of heavy pots. Gordon stepped out of his office, ready to leave, and saw her washing her hands under the faucet. No makeup, no small talk, just the overhead light falling on her damp hair. She bowed her head slightly, gently scrubbing her hands. Water ran down her fingers, rinsing away oil, flour, and exhaustion. Gordon froze, not because of beauty, but because of that stillness, as if she needed no one, asked for nothing. She was simply there, present in the kitchen, with no words, no performance, no need for recognition. He thought of himself at age 12, in a freezing industrial kitchen, hands trembling from the weight of the knife, no one to guide him, no one to catch him. And now here was Clara washing her hands like it was a ritual of someone who carried no anger. Clara met his eyes quietly. She didn't ask anything, but she knew. Gordon wasn't just a man obsessed with control. He was someone who had grown up in such chaos. He had to control everything just to survive. And maybe he had never tasted a meal that was truly cooked with love. It rained. London was cold and damp that day. Clara arrived earlier than usual. She brought with her a container of vegetable soup, the one her mother used to make. Same recipe, same flavor. But this time, she added a touch of nutmeg because Gordon once mentioned it, reminded him of his first winter after being adopted. Gordon wasn't in the kitchen. She placed the soup on the counter with a small note. "It's not a perfect dish, but if you taste it and say nothing, I'll know I'm still doing what my mother taught me." She left before he arrived. Gordon walked in, saw the container, opened it, tasted, and said nothing. For a very long time. It was a morning like any other. The kitchen at Vale thrummed with the familiar rhythm of blades hitting cutting boards, the soft murmur of pots and pans simmering like the heartbeat of a machine operating at its peak. Clara had just dried her hands and was preparing vegetables for the lunch menu when Gordon's phone rang, urgent and unrelenting. He picked it up, then froze. A headline had just gone live on the European culinary media circuit. Gordon Vale and the old scandal. His most famous dish wasn't his. The article included a quote from a female chef who had worked with Gordon 12 years ago during a prestigious competition in France. In the interview, she stated, "The award-winning dessert wasn't Gordon's creation. I thought we were a team, but on the day of the award ceremony, he didn't say my name. Not once." Her name was Elodie Marais, once the youngest talent at Le Cordon Bleu. After the scandal, she was branded a fame seeker and expelled from the International Chefs Association for violating professional ethics. Elodie had disappeared from the culinary world for nearly a decade. Clara read the article in the staff lounge, her phone screen reflecting the growing shadow across her face. Her heart tightened not because of the scandalous headline, but because of something she couldn't quite name. She had begun to believe Gordon was different now, a man learning to change, to soften, to fall silent for the things that truly mattered. But this stain couldn't be washed away by soup, or the rare smile he offered in the kitchen, or even the quiet words of advice he'd given her just nights before. She stepped into the walk-in fridge, standing among the crates of vegetables, letting the cold bite into her hands as if the sting could keep her alert. Gordon said nothing. He passed Clara several times that lunch shift, his eyes never meeting hers, and she didn't ask. That evening, the restaurant emptied out earlier than usual. Clara was getting ready to leave when Gordon called her back. "Can we talk?" His voice was low, not commanding, not pleading, just a man needing to be heard and maybe forgiven. She sat down at the familiar stainless steel table. No stage lights, no camera smoke, just the two of them, and a past that refused to stay buried. "That story, it's true," Gordon said, his eyes fixed on the shadows behind the oven, beyond the reach of any light. "Elodie came up with that dessert. We worked together. But I was the face, the presenter, the one in front of the cameras." "You forgot to mention her," Clara asked. Her voice wasn't angry, just a person asking for an admission. "Number, I deliberately didn't mention her," he said. "I thought if I shared the spotlight, I'd disappear. I wanted to win." Clara swallowed the tight knot in her throat, not from shock, but from a slow, bitter disappointment, like the aftertaste of over-roasted coffee. "And she lost everything?" she asked. "She didn't deserve that," Gordon said. "I know, but back then I believed that to survive in this world, you had to steal before you got stolen from." Clara fell quiet. She thought back to their arguments over knives, over sauces, over the perfect softness of boiled eggs. She had once believed Gordon was arrogant because of his obsession with control. Now she understood he was someone who lived in constant fear of losing his place, a boy who had grown up with nothing to call his own. So when the spotlight came, he clung to it like it was his lifeline. "Do you regret it?" Clara asked quietly. Gordon looked straight at her. "Yes, but not because it came out. Because I lost something more valuable than reputation." Clara frowned. "What?" He answered without hesitation. "Self-respect in the eyes of someone like you." She turned away, emotions rising. She wasn't sure if it was pain, sympathy, or both, but part of her still wanted to believe in him like she once had. Gordon stood, walked to the spice rack, and took out a small jar. "This is the dried dill your mother used, right? I took it from the studio kitchen you used last time," he said, placing it on the table. "Your memory saved me twice, but mine once destroyed someone else." She stood, met his gaze, voice raspy. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest." Gordon nodded, a nod without pride, without defense, as if he were finally returning something he had stolen, from others and from himself. That night, Clara didn't leave immediately. She went back to the kitchen and quietly made a pot of ginger tea. She said nothing about forgiveness, but she placed 2 mugs on the table, one for him, one for her. Steam curled between them, like a fragile but honest bridge, rebuilding itself between 2 wounded souls. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. A week had passed since the night Gordon confessed the darkest stain on his career. Clara still showed up to work on time, still cooked, still smiled at the servers, and quietly washed her knives after the last shift. But between her and Gordon, there was now a space something no dish could fill. She didn't avoid him, nor was she cold. It was just that the silence between them, once warm and easy, now felt like a draft blowing through a kitchen that used to be full of fire. Clara didn't know what Gordon was thinking. She wasn't even sure what she was feeling. But she remembered his last words that night. "I lost self-respect in the eyes of someone like you." She didn't know if she still looked at him the same way, but she noticed since that day, Gordon no longer moved fast in the kitchen. He slowed down, often standing still, eyes fixed on the flames like they were burning something old away. On Friday morning, as Clara was prepping vegetables for the evening shift, Gordon entered the kitchen not with his usual notebook, but with a small slip of paper, which he laid on the table. "This afternoon," he said, not looking up from her hands peeling shallots, "I'm going to see her." Clara looked up. Her. There was no need to ask. It was Elodie Marais. "I called," Gordon continued. "She agreed to meet. No cameras, no press. I don't want anyone to witness it except the one who needs to." Clara didn't say anything, but her gaze softened. "Would you come with me?" Gordon asked. It wasn't a command. It wasn't disguised as casual. It was the most honest request he had ever spoken. Clara nodded. That afternoon, they traveled to a small town outside Lyon, France. Elodie's house looked almost identical to Clara's mother's home in Windermere old tile roof, faded plaster walls, a fence covered in blooming climbing roses. Elodie opened the door, her hair tied low, her face no longer radiant like in the old photos, but her eyes still bright. She didn't smile. She didn't accuse. She simply opened the door, gestured for them to come in, and said, "I have nothing to serve guests. I don't cook for anyone but myself now." Clara stepped forward gently. "Then let me cook." No one objected. In Elodie's small kitchen, Clara found a few eggs, leafy greens, old bread, some dry onions, and a bottle of olive oil. She made French-style steamed eggs, toasted the bread with garlic and basil, and stir-fried the vegetables simply. No fancy sauces, no elegant plating, just a small meal, but warm enough. As she set the plates on the scratched wooden table, Clara said, "My mother used to say some meals aren't meant to be remembered. They're meant to let people pause for a moment." The three of them sat down. No one touched the food right away. Gordon was the first to speak. "I have no excuse," he said, not meeting Elodie's eyes. "Back then, I was afraid of losing my place. I thought the spotlight was the only thing keeping me in a world where I never belonged. And when you brought that dish, I knew it would win. But I was scared that if it won with both of us, people would choose you." Elodie stayed silent, her hands under the table clenched, then slowly released. "I cost you your career, your voice, your trust," Gordon went on, his voice unsteady. "And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that dish isn't the only thing I remember about you. I remember how you laughed while whipping egg whites, how you fixed every tiny detail, even when no one noticed. I remember the things I tried to forget because I was too ashamed." Elodie reached into her pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and slowly dabbed her eyes. Still, she said nothing. Clara quietly took a bite of toast, giving Gordon space to face the past. She understood today's meal wasn't for pleasure. It was to let people sit together without needing justification. Finally, Elodie looked up, her voice hoarse. "I lost a lot, but I also learned. I learned I didn't need anyone's approval to know who I am. I don't cook anymore, but I'm still here." Gordon nodded. Clara gently placed her hand on the table. "I can't fix what was lost, but if today I could cook for the two of you, maybe I helped that dish become more than just a scar." Elodie looked at Clara. For the first time, her lips curved into a faint smile. Not because she felt comforted, but because she saw in Clara something that might be called courage. The courage to stand between two broken people and warm them with something simple. The meal ended without the words, "I forgive you," but there was no bitterness either. Just three people, sharing a meal without guests, without an audience, without expectations. And when they got up from the table, they carried with them something softer, lighter, more honest. On the flight back to London, Gordon didn't speak much. But as the plane touched down, he turned to Clara and said, "Thank you for being there. Not to forgive her for me, but to cook a meal that made me stop feeling like a thief." Clara simply smiled. "I can't save your past, but maybe I can help save the way you see it." After the trip to Lyon, Clara and Gordon were no longer two people maintaining distance in the kitchen. There wasn't any obvious shift in how they treated each other. They still argued about seasoning salt, plating order, and the thickness of the caramel layer. But the silence between them had changed. It no longer carried tension or doubt, but understanding. Not caution, but trust. And that change made the kitchen at Vale, once infamous for being a cold, flawless machine, begin to warm bit by bit. One rare afternoon when the kitchen closed early, Clara and Gordon sat together at the small bar in the back, an area no customers ever saw. In front of them were 2 cups of mint tea and a loaf of cinnamon toast Clara had made while idle. They didn't speak for a long while. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the early autumn air of London, wafting the scent of damp grass through the window. Gordon couldn't remember exactly how old he was the first time he had a hot meal. His earliest memories held no golden brown toast, no comforting clatter of gas burners in the morning, no aroma of sautéed onions from a steaming rice pot. His childhood was the screech of iron doors each morning, silent lines of children marching to the communal dining hall, plastic trays scratched and filled with watery soup and stale bread. But one day, in the middle of winter, the soup had flavor. It had real vegetables. It smelled of celery. It was something softer than loneliness. The 8-year-old boy didn't know who had cooked it, but he remembered clearly. That night, he slept warm. 30 years later, Gordon sat in the back kitchen of his own restaurant, sipping mint tea and listening to a woman speak in a calm, steady voice about her mother, as if telling a bedtime story. The woman was Clara, and her mother, Margaret, might very well have been the person who gave Gordon his first memory of a meal made with love. "My mother used to be a teacher," Clara said, her eyes fixed not on Gordon, but on the wood grain of the table. "After she retired, she refused to sit still. She said, 'In the time I have left, I want to do something that makes me feel useful.' She chose cooking," Clara continued, like reading from a worn diary. "Every month she made over 100 meals. She washed, chopped, cooked, packed them herself, then drove to orphanages, shelters, homes for abused women, even nursing facilities. Gordon said nothing. He only nodded slowly, as if his entire body needed to listen to what she was about to say next. I used to think she did it for recognition. I was even angry when she declined every invitation to speak on local TV. One time I asked her, "Don't you want people to thank you?" She looked at me for a long time and finally said, "If you cook for someone just so they'll thank you, then it's not food. It's a noose." Clara looked up, her eyes clear. My mother didn't need to be thanked. She only needed to know someone ate well that night. And I think maybe you were one of those people who tasted her soup. Gordon let out a slow, quiet breath, like he'd just brushed dust from a long-forgotten memory. The image from Briar Hill rose vividly stronger than ever. Not just the taste, but the vision of a woman with rough hands stirring soup with a giant wooden spoon, gently scolding the children not to fight over portions, then sneaking an extra ladleful to the boy at the end of the line. That boy was him. "I used to think your mother came out of charity," Gordon said, his voice deep and heavy, like the bottom of a long-simmered stock pot. "But now I know she was feeding hope." "Hope?" Clara whispered, as if repeating something she, too, had never fully understood. He nodded slowly. Not just feeding children's bodies, but reminding them the world hadn't entirely abandoned them. They fell into silence again. In the room, nothing but the hum of the vent, the soft yellow light hitting empty glassware, and the quiet presence of a seasoning too subtle to name. Clara held her cup a little tighter. Her voice trembled ever so slightly, like a silver spoon resting in a porcelain bowl. "I used to feel like my mother loved others more than me, because whenever I needed her, she was off cooking for strangers. I used to feel jealous, but I never dared to say it. I was afraid it would hurt her, that she'd think I was selfish." "You weren't selfish," Gordon said. "You just wanted to feel like the only child she held." Clara turned to him, startled by such words, especially from a man who seemed like he didn't know how to hold anyone. "I know that feeling," Gordon said, locking eyes with her. "At Briar Hill, we were just a crowd. No one got called by their real name, just kid, or hey, or you. But when she came, she asked each one of us, 'What's your name? Do you like spicy food? Do you prefer carrots or potatoes?' She didn't need to remember our answers. Just asking made us feel like someone." Clara bit her lower lip. She thought of her mother's eyes each time she cooked, not tired, not just trying to finish the task. Cooking like she was telling a story, like each carrot slice was a piece of memory, smoothed and offered with care. "Maybe," Gordon said, almost a confession, "she once fed me. Not for long, not clearly, but enough for me to know. Love has a smell." Clara smiled, a real smile, gentle, like the glow of a fire flickering inside an old iron stove. She wrapped her hands around her cup, then looked up. "What does it smell like?" "Celery," Gordon answered, "and kindness that doesn't care to be remembered." A single tear slipped from the corner of Clara's eye, not out of sadness, not pain, but the kind of tear that falls when you realize the very thing you once resented is what saved the person you now love. All of Britain was watching tonight. The London Palate, the country's most prestigious culinary competition, had reached its grand finale, with 3 remaining names. Marco, a flamboyant Italian chef famed for his sophisticated techniques. Isabel, a cold kitchen prodigy with years of experience in 3 Michelin-star restaurants. And Clara Bennett, the woman from a small-town cafe. No resume, no formal training, no accolades. The stage was transformed into a theater. White lights beamed down onto 3 kitchen stations, spaced apart like 3 worlds waiting to be born. The audience seats were packed. Flash bulbs from media outlets popped nonstop. Investors, celebrity chefs, even a few politicians filled the rows. No one expected Clara to make it this far, which is why every eye was now on her, the woman no one could profile. Only her food spoke. Gordon Vale, the head judge, stepped forward. No smile, no introduction, just a single line spoken low, cold, and deep. Final challenge: cook for someone who doesn't know what they need. A hush fell over the entire room. No one spoke. Everyone understood. This was no longer a test of skill. It was a mirror held to the soul, a dish not meant to impress, but to make the eater feel seen. The three finalists began almost in unison. Marco reached for foie gras, marsala wine, black truffles, and a rich red wine reduction. Isabel grabbed nitrogen canisters, cream cheese, kiwi gel, and plum mousse. They moved like symphonic conductors writing their final crescendo with breathtaking precision. Clara stood still. She didn't look at the ingredients. She looked out into the audience toward an empty seat. No family, no allies in the press, just a vacant chair, like a memory of someone who once sat there for her. She inhaled, walked to the fridge and pulled out carrots, onions, potatoes, a bit of celery, unsalted butter, eggs, white sandwich bread, and some heavy cream. No one understood what she was doing. No one expected anything from such elementary ingredients. She began simmering the vegetables, pressed them for broth, seasoned with sea salt and a spoon of olive oil, toasted the bread by hand, no machine, boiled the eggs soft with the yolk still runny, whipped garlic butter by hand until smooth. Nothing that could be called haute cuisine, just a meal. Something you might make for someone coming home late from work, someone with a cold, someone who just had their heart broken, or someone who didn't even realize they needed to eat. Marco plated his foie gras with 3 types of sauce. Isabel presented her mousse, a watercolor on porcelain. Applause broke out. Some in the crowd stood to clap. When Clara placed her dish, just a bowl of warm soup, a slice of golden toast, and a halved, soft-boiled egg onto the silver tray, a few snickers echoed from the rows. She stepped forward, set her tray down, and stepped back. A full minute of silence. Some audience members whispered. One laughed behind their hand, and another tilted their head. "This is the finale." A judge narrowed his eyes. "Who is this dish for?" he asked. Clara didn't answer right away. She looked at every face before her, then said, "For someone who's never believed they were loved, so they don't know they're hungry for a hug." Gordon remained silent. The 3 judges lifted their spoons one by one. The first, Madame Blanche, an international flavor expert known for her strict standards, tasted first. She was often the hardest to please. After one spoonful, she looked up, but didn't speak immediately. She gently set the spoon down, looked at Clara and said, "This dish reminds me of when I was 12, alone for the first time, eating soup my grandmother packed. No one remembers the recipe, but I remember the feeling." The room was completely still. The second judge, Thomas Dreyer, a culinary critic infamous for 3 decades of scathing reviews, tasted next. He furrowed his brow, not from displeasure, but because something had caught in his throat. He took a sip of water, then muttered almost to himself, "This doesn't register on acid, fat, or umami scales, but if my wife were still alive, I know she'd ask for another bowl." Gordon lifted his spoon. For the first time, no one prompted him to speak. He took a bite. There was no dramatic surprise, but he paused. His gaze lifted slowly. His breath deepened. The silence lingered longer than it should have. He ate a piece of toast, then half the egg. His hand holding the spoon trembled slightly. Everything melted in his mouth like it was nothing special. But it made you slow down. Hold it longer. Not because it was delicious, but because it made your stomach and something deeper in your chest feel safe. Gordon set the spoon down. He turned to the audience and said, his voice deep but clear, "This isn't a meal, it's a hug. It's a whisper saying, I know you're tired. You don't need to be extraordinary. I just want you full, and to know you deserve to stay." Silence, he turned to Clara. "Maybe I never knew I needed a hug, until today." No one clapped, not because they weren't impressed, but because no one wanted to break the emotion now suspended in the air. It wasn't a dish that made people gasp. It was a dish that made people feel seen. No more laughter, no more whispers. Some bowed their heads, others wiped their eyes. And at the center of the stage, a woman with no diploma, no backstory, no media strategy, had cooked a meal that silenced the world. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Clara Bennett's name was announced beneath a shower of golden confetti, thunderous applause, and the glare of stage lights. The camera zoomed in on her face not to catch an outburst of joy, but to find a calm, almost serene stillness. The girl with no resume, no accolades, no media strategy had just been crowned the winner of the London Palette. Gordon, standing beside her, was the one to offer her the silver trophy, but she didn't take it right away. She looked at it, the symbol of an unexpected victory, then slowly reached out and gently pushed it back toward him. I respectfully declined the title. The entire auditorium fell silent, as if someone had pulled the plug on sound itself. Even Gordon froze for a split second. The judges looked stunned. The camera zoomed in again on Clara's face, as if to confirm she wasn't joking. I didn't enter this competition to win, Clara said, her voice soft but ringing clearly through the silence. I entered to prove that sometimes even those with nothing to show can still feed something real in others. She bowed, then walked off the stage under blazing lights, leaving the silver trophy resting quietly in Gordon Vale's hands. 3 weeks later, a foggy morning blanketed the neighborhood of Eastborough, a district once considered a blank spot on the city's investment map. On a cobbled street, a small shop had appeared overnight, its hand-painted sign slightly crooked. The open kitchen, eat and share your story if you like. No fancy branding, no celebrity name attached, just one long table in an open kitchen, a few wooden chairs, and the warm scent of toast drifting through the doorway. Clara Bennett had used her entire prize money to build this place, a community kitchen where anyone could come for a hot meal, no questions asked. No one asked where you came from. No one asked what you had to give. The elderly, children, the unhoused, even lonely office workers. They could all walk in and sit down. Every morning, Clara rode her bike in from a nearby housing complex, opened the kitchen at 9 a.m., lit the stove with her own hands and began prepping vegetables as if she were cooking for family. There were no titles here, no spotlights, but the quiet thank yous, the shy nods from strangers, and the children washing dishes between giggles. Those were enough to let Clara know she was exactly where she was meant to be. One late autumn afternoon, with the chill starting to creep in through every crack and corner, Clara was rinsing vegetables when she heard the doorbell chime softly. No fanfare, no camera flashes, just the sound of slow, steady footsteps. She looked up and saw Gordon Vale. No suit, no tie, just him, standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking slightly out of place. "Here to critique my boiled eggs?" Clara asked, half teasing, half guarded. Gordon chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Number I came to ask, if you need someone to wash dishes, I'm not great at it, but I'm willing to learn." Clara tilted her head, pretending to consider it. "As long as you don't throw the dish towel into the soup pot." Gordon placed a hand over his chest. "I swear, on the honor of someone who once got kicked out of culinary school for washing lettuce wrong." They both laughed, and for the first time, their laughter had no walls. No defensiveness. Just the laughter of two people who had once stood on opposite ends of the spectrum, power and invisibility, now meeting in the only place where no proof was needed, a small kitchen. That afternoon, one of Britain's most renowned chefs rolled up his sleeves to wash vegetables and scrub pots in an unnamed kitchen. The tap water was cold. The soap stung his hands. The smell of garlic clung under his nails. He worked quietly, without complaint. Clara stood beside him, showing a child how to cut onions with their left hand, glancing over occasionally with a soft smile. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thought I'd see Gordon Vale doing dishes in my kitchen." "I never thought I'd cook beside the person who reminded me why I started," he replied. When they finished, they sat at an old wooden table by the window, holding warm mugs of tea. "Why did you open this place?" Gordon asked, not as a challenge, but as a man simply trying to understand. Clara looked outside, where a little boy played with a chubby dog. "Because I once knew what it felt like to be hungry, but not know what I was hungry for. And I think there are still a lot of people out there like that." Gordon didn't answer. After a pause, he said softly, without looking at her, "You didn't win that competition, Clara." Clara raised an eyebrow, ready to respond. But he continued, "Because you were never competing. You just reminded people what it feels like to be fed as a human being. The wind whispered outside. Light rain began to fall. In that kitchen, there were no sponsors, no cameras rolling, just the sound of knives slicing vegetables, dishes clinking quietly together, and two people who had once been wounded by glory, now choosing to heal, with the simplest things in the world. It was a quiet Sunday morning in a small Surrey suburb, where sunlight poured over low fences draped in wildflowers. A modest red brick house stood nestled in a garden of herbs and vegetables, nothing that would catch the eye of a passerby. But inside that humble kitchen, something important was about to happen. Gordon Vale stood at the gate, holding a paper bag of fresh bread and a small bundle of dried lavender. An awkward gift, perhaps, but it was all he could think to bring for the most important meeting of his life. He had never thought of himself as someone who got nervous, but that morning, his heart was beating strangely fast. As if, after thousands of dishes cooked in his life, this was the first time he was offering something to someone, not to be praised, but to be forgiven. Clara opened the door in an old apron, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. No makeup, no pretense. Just Clara, the woman who had helped him remember a memory he thought he'd lost. Her eyes were gentle, though a flicker of nervousness lingered. "My mom's in the kitchen," Clara said softly, with a glint of mischief in her eye. "I told her. An old colleague was coming over." Gordon smiled. He stepped inside, and the small kitchen was instantly filled with the scent of roasted corn, melting butter, and something else, something warm and nameless. Margaret, Clara's mother, was flipping corn pancakes on a cast-iron skillet, her petite frame steady and precise. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Gordon," he said. "I came to thank you." Margaret turned, narrowing her eyes at the tall man whose honesty made him look like a hungry child again. "Thank me for what?" Gordon set the bread and lavender down on the table. He swallowed hard. "For the soup you used to make for Briar Hill. You wouldn't know it, but one of the children who ate it was me." Margaret paused. Her palm trembled slightly. The wooden spatula froze over the skillet. "You were one of those children?" Gordon nodded. Then he told her without embellishment about the freezing winters, when the smell of vegetable soup was the only proof someone in the world still cared. He spoke with a voice thick with memory. Not a single tear fell, but every word carried the weight of something long buried. "I never knew who you were, but that taste, it's the reason I became a chef." Margaret looked at him, her eyes shining. She didn't need to say anything. She gently laid a hand on his shoulder. "Then, we met a long time ago, son." That afternoon, Clara and Gordon stood together in the kitchen at the open kitchen, where they were hosting a cooking class for children in the neighborhood. No cameras, no judges, just laughter, the sound of sizzling oil, and small, clumsy hands trying to slice onions. Gordon didn't just teach knife skills, he knelt beside each child, guiding them through every slice, every pan temperature. His eyes no longer carried the sharp glint of fame, but the quiet care of a teacher. Someone who had once been hungry, who had once trembled holding a knife, and now passed along the thing that once saved him. At the main stove, Clara showed a smaller group how to make pumpkin soup. As she stirred the pot, Gordon stepped beside her, washing his hands at the sink. "You once said I wasn't a real chef," Gordon said, loud enough to be heard over the happy chaos. Clara didn't look up. She just smiled as she stirred. "I remember, a bit long-winded, but memorable." Gordon laughed. He looked at her this time with nothing held back. "Now all I want is to eat your food every day." Clara paused, turned to face him. Her gaze didn't sparkle. It glowed soft as candlelight, but it was enough to keep him frozen. "And all I want is for you to eat it and say nothing, because that's how I'll know it reached your heart." They stood there not kissing, not making declarations, but in the space between salt, onions, herbs, and oil, they made a quiet promise. Someday they might open a restaurant, maybe not, but there would always be a kitchen for two, where every dish began with one simple truth: cook for someone you love. That late summer afternoon in the garden behind the community kitchen, Clara stood in front of a table prepared by her young students, the pasta dish she'd taught them the week before now, presented in every possible variation. Overcooked, undersalted, crooked, cheesy, and joyful. The children were beaming, and that was enough. Then Gordon called her to the back garden. A long table draped in checkered cloth, delicate ceramic cups, and dishes from all over. Italian soup, Argentinian roast, even a simple scallion porridge like the one Clara once made for the unhoused. "You teach people to cook with love," Gordon said. "Today, I cook to ask for it." Clara looked at him, wearing a brand new apron, his hands dusted with flour, a smudge of herb on his brow. He didn't kneel. He stood tall, hand over his heart. "No ring. But if you need one, I'll mold it out of chocolate." She laughed. The children whistled. Margaret wiped away tears behind a flower pot. Gordon continued, "Be my wife, not because I'm a great chef, but because I want to spend every day reseasoning life with you. A pinch of salt, a bit of sweetness, and a whole lot of courage. Will you?" Clara nodded, then whispered, "As long as our kitchen never closes." 1 month later, they held their wedding in the garden of the community kitchen. No expensive gown, no champagne, just a wood-fired oven, fresh-baked bread, and a chalkboard menu that read, "Clara and Gordon's Wedding Feast. Eat if hungry, love if you want, and do the dishes if you can." The guests were those who once received free meals, former students, a few quiet chefs who once worked behind Gordon's scenes, and Margaret, who cut the wedding cake made of 12 layers of buttered herb bread. No one brought flowers. Everyone brought an ingredient: carrots, ginger, stew, laughter, tears. They cooked, together. As night fell, and the golden light from the kitchen spilled across the garden, Gordon held Clara close and said through a smile, "I've worked in hundreds of kitchens, but this one where you stand is the only one I ever want to come home to." Clara said nothing. She simply placed his hand into hers and whispered, "Let's cook a life worth savoring."